All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I know people will continue joining, but for the sake of time. So first off, we have a couple of introductions to make. Again, welcome to our Summer Academy students who are joining us. We hope you are enjoying your time and enjoy this lecture today. Just a reminder for all of you students, there will be a survey at the end. So if you could please stick around and fill out that survey, we would really appreciate it. And then our other introduction is we have officially, our new M1 students have officially joined the program. So I think it would be great if we could take a moment for them all just to briefly introduce themselves. So if you all would like to go around and just say your name and where you went to undergrad, we can give some silent rounds of applause for you.
I guess I'll start. Hi, I'm Jordan Washachek. I'm coming from University of Redlands. It's a little school in California. It's good to be here.
Hi, I'm Joe. I went to Louisiana State University, and I'm going to be moving up to Nashville in a couple days. Looking forward to being there.
Hey everybody, I'm Raymond Zhang. I went to college in Massachusetts at Wheaton College. Just moved to Nashville this past weekend and I'm excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Haley. I went to undergrad here at Vanderbilt, so excited to stay here.
Hi everybody, my name's Drew. I'm from Philly and went to Northwestern, and I'm also in the process of moving in, so I'm super excited to be here.
Hi everyone, my name is Nada. I went to undergrad at the University of Cincinnati, and I'm also very excited to be joining you guys soon.
Okay, I can go next. Hey, I'm Arlene. I'm also from Philly, and I went to Penn for undergrad.
Hi everyone, my name is Kyle Enriquez, and I went to Stanford for undergrad.
Hi, I'm Ji Woo, and I went to University of Virginia.
Hi, my name is Joseph. I went to Tulane University in New Orleans for undergrad.
Hi, my name is Kimmy, and I went to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville.
Hi everyone, my name's Caitlin. I went to University of Michigan and excited to move down in like a week or so.
All right, I think that's everyone. If we're missing someone, please speak up so we don't forget you. But all right, so I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker for this week. This week we'll be hearing from David Wu. So David is from Columbus, Ohio. He attended Johns Hopkins University for undergraduate. Started in the Vandy MSTP in the summer of 2015. He's now a rising G4 student in the Hatzopoulos lab, where he's looking at hematopoiesis in the context of systemic stressors. So one of his favorite parts about the Vandy MSTP and living in Nashville is the collaborative culture and the people that we have here. And then his fun fact about himself is that he drinks 1 to 2 pots of coffee daily, which I can identify with. That was a quarantine habit of mine as well. All right, so thank you very much to everyone. Just one last reminder before we get started. Out of respect for the speaker, we encourage everyone to turn on your cameras and then just make sure you double check right now that you're muted. All right. David, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, sure. Can I share my screen? Can you guys see that? Okay, cool. Here it goes. So hi everyone. Thank you Noreen and Andrew for both organizing this and giving me a chance to speak with you today. Personally, I'm really passionate about health and nutrition, but I also have enormous problems with authority. I hate being told what to do and I can't stand it. So instead of presenting it like in a format where I'm telling you what to do and why, I thought it might be more interesting to share my story from the very beginning and kind of go through what I ate throughout my life, why I did it, how it affected my life, and what I think of it now. I hope you all enjoy it and get something useful out of it. And so just some introductory thoughts. The US has a really huge health and fitness problem right now. So 1 in 3 Americans have some glucose metabolism issue, either being pre-diabetic or diabetic. And then globally, obesity is on the rise. There's a lot of health consequences as a result. And then in my opinion, I feel like the medical recommendations are a little meh. They're not addressing a lot of the social factors. They're not addressing some of the issues that are associated with eating behaviors. And I will preface this talk with the fact that nutrition is highly individualized, and it is kind of a controversial subject to talk about. And I think that's why it's worth discussing. I think at the end of the day, you should do your own research and find what works for you. I think the data is generated from your own self-experimentation, and you can't really apply any universal data for your specific challenges and problems. And then next, I would say don't trust the government. Of all things that they're not an expert in, this is probably one of the biggest areas where they're not an expert in. This was the 1992 FDA recommended food pyramid. I think, yeah, 1992. The bottom compartment is enormous. It's a 6 to 11 grain servings. This has been rectified recently. I think the max is now 6. And this was not based on health data. It was based on expert opinions, but in part it was motivated by grain subsidizations of grain farmers. So they were trying to incentivize consumption of grain products using this recommendation. And again, I just want to reiterate, don't listen to the government, read your own literature, and definitely self-experiment. So if you look at the overweight and obese prevalence, and you look at the slopes which indicate incidence rates, you see that when they introduced this, the slope gets a little steeper, indicating that there was actually a rise in incidence rates of overweight and obese individuals in this age group. So just rehashing, I don't think the government is worth listening to. And definitely just do your own reading and make your own conclusions.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
There are gray boxes showing up on your screen. I don't know if
Oh, sorry. This is you guys. I'm sorry. Sorry. That was just the Zoom, I think. I'll move it. Thanks for pointing that out. Thanks. Okay. So I'll start at the very beginning. I was, like many products here in the US, made in China. I was born September 1st, 1992. My geography knowledge is a little bit limited, but I'm pretty sure I was born somewhere in this red circle. Before I was born, my dad left for the US. He wanted to pave a new life for our family. On his side, our family was pretty uneducated. Both my grandparents were illiterate. And so he wanted to use his academic abilities to build something new and create new opportunities for both of us. A little bit after nursing me, my mom also left me. So I was put in the care of my grandmother, who raised me from the age of 1 to 4. And she's kind of more of the motherly figure for me. Also, I'm really grateful for this opportunity, just because I think having been back to China, it's a really suppressed society. There's not a lot of discussion. There's more of a forceful alignment of underlying ideology. And I'm really grateful for the society that I'm in here now, where we can talk about controversial topics and there's no suppression of speech or ideas. If you don't know anything about Chinese culture, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, my dad was kind of special in that he was the only male offspring granted to my grandparents. There is a cultural attitude towards males that is a little bit different towards females, in that they carry on the family name. My aunts also had parental support. I don't think my grandparents treated them any differently. But independent of this cultural attitude, my dad was the most academically driven and successful in the history of our family. And he's done a lot for me and for our life here. So as the eldest son of the only son in our family, there were a lot of expectations placed on me. And you can see that this attitude is embedded in my name, where my given name means, the second character means vast limitless sky, and the third character means earth. So it's not a name of great humility. And you also notice that it doesn't translate to David. There is a Mandarin equivalent, which is Da Wei, but I actually had the privilege of naming myself, and did so kind of ignorantly. I chose it out of a Chinese American dictionary in the 3rd grade, just because I got kind of tired of how many ways you could pronounce my name and how long these events would last. But not surprisingly, because of these high expectations, I was raised basically by tiger parents. And so with a big name, I was a big baby. I came out pretty heavy, around 8 pounds, 6 ounces. And I thank my mom every day for that. So prepping for this div talk, I also wanted to see if my personality phenotype might be related to infant feeding. If I was bottle fed for some reason, or if I was breastfed. And to my surprise, I was actually bottle fed from the very start, but it wasn't because I wasn't breastfed. It was just that the milk was not enough in these situations. And so I was a voracious feeder, and there just wasn't enough for me to be appeased. And my caretakers at the time gave in. I didn't really have a choice of what I wanted to eat. And I think there's some long-term implications here in that I think I should have been starved a little bit, mostly because I think this crucial period does regulate long-term feeding behaviors down the road, and consequently also outcomes. So most of my toddler photos are actually nude. The ones that are clothed have just been shown. But after I turned 4, my caretakers felt it was time to ship me to the new world and join my parents, and this really broke both me and my grandmother's heart. When I came, my parents pretty much raised me. I had a really normal immigrant childhood, a lot of emphasis on education and learning from a young age, and they created new careers here in the States that were pretty high pressure in academics and also in software engineering. I think what's tough is that as an immigrant coming to a new culture, there's actually a lot of research showing that it's a common problem with immigrants, where when you come here, you experience some degree of weight gain. My parents did the best with what they knew. We didn't have a lot of money, so we were frugal with the food we bought, which immensely affected the quality of it. I think the attempt was to eat more vegetables and lean meats, but it was just far easier and cheaper to eat fast food and sweets. And so this caused a lot of issues for me. So I think because of the weight gain, I was always pretty much overweight and not very athletic. And so as a result, I was extremely insecure about myself, and I had a lot of social anxiety, which is why I liked wearing baggy clothes, and I didn't put a lot of effort in how I looked. I'd say this kind of progressed into early high school. And also early on in life, my parents moved a lot to try to put me in a good school district. So I didn't really have a stable base of friends. I will say, so I went to Dublin Durham High School. It's a suburb off of Columbus, Ohio. And so for me, I built a lot of self-confidence here and worked on my social skills by trying to be a class clown. Here's me in shenanigans in the state capitol. And I became more or less a troll. I also played violin and wrestled. This is a picture taken when my orchestra conductor wouldn't let me skip a recital on the same day as a duel. So I decided that there was not enough time to make it both without some improvisation. She wasn't thrilled, and neither was the principal watching. And so I had kind of a Dublin Durham equivalent of a Veritas and a coffee talk for my behavior. And so wrestling really gave me the ability to kind of think about my nutrition differently. I initially started this sport because someone had said that it was an easy way to get fit because it was a really tough sport. And also for me, it helped me kind of build my self-esteem. And this is when I really started to look at nutrition a little bit more intentionally. I began to eat more protein and vegetables for the sake of athletic performance. And I think this is a good period of time in my childhood where I think cognitively, physically, and also from a self-esteem perspective, I started to have a lot of benefits. Senior year is kind of when things changed a little bit. And eating disorders are common, I think, for wrestlers specifically, but also across this age group. But for me, in order to cut weight, I cut from 215 pounds to 189. And to do that, I wouldn't recommend this ever to anyone or I would ever do this again. But I would eat nothing, drink very little until match day. It really suffered my athletic performance. And then after the match, I'd go to a Chinese buffet and just kind of go to town and refeed. Also, I had often purged if the meals were ingested before match day. And I think this was just a terrible idea overall for my health. It led to a rebounding effect, leading and continuing into college. So I got into Hopkins. I applied for the BME program and also got in. And I think the stress of being a college student was really tough. And I never really had the discipline or the mindset to eat healthy and be disciplined in my lifestyle. So everything kind of became dysregulated. I gained a lot of weight during the freshman year. I think this likely contributed to a lot of my serious health consequences. And I think also the weight cut from senior year I think this is sort of a relapse or a rebound from that as well. So the summer after my freshman year, and this date has a lot of meaning to me. I still remember vividly that date and the night before. So my dad was a practicing physician. He really worked hard to get to that position. But we had conversations the night prior during a grocery shopping trip about my eating habits, my sleeping schedule, and how unhealthy it was. And he made the comment that if I didn't do something about it, I would have a serious health event. The next day, I remember doing push-ups, and I felt a pop in my head, and I went to see what might be going on. And we talked a little bit. My dad didn't think anything was wrong at first until I collapsed to my left side. We went to the ER, got CT scans, and I had a complete occlusion on my right internal carotid. Because collaterals had developed, TPA was contraindicated, so the clot stayed there over the next 2 weeks, and it progressively got worse and worse, completely losing function on my left side. And this is also an opportunity for me to share something I think is important for future medical providers, which is that in any field, and especially fields where there's a lot of medical intervention that's limited, what you can do oftentimes, and this has had a tremendous impact on me, is to be a fellow human. And so I remember being incredibly unmotivated to pursue any kind of rehab, really scared and depressed during this time after the event. And I remember a doctor, the attending neurologist at the time, took an opportunity to come and just chat with me. And he pulled me aside. And I don't think if he didn't do this, I'd be here talking with all of you and be a part of this program. He just said, "Hey, look, I'm noticing you're not doing a rehab. You know, like you're a tough guy. You're in a tough program at a high level institution. You did wrestling. I'm just wondering why you're not pursuing this or going for it." And I think at this point in the sort of hospitalization course, I realized that at this I didn't feel like I had the strength to face what was ahead. I didn't know how to do it. There were no answers, and I didn't know how to move forward. And having someone come to you and say that they believed you or you had the strength to keep going, I think had a tremendous impact in shaping my perspective on my situation, accepting the current conditions, and then moving forward from that. And I encourage all of you to do the same for your future patients. So I took a semester off before going back to college. I had regained some function and some strength, but overall I felt pretty inept and inadequate. I was terrified of the future. I was really terrified about being, not just being a student, but just how to be a person again. And also this task of re-entering college is difficult because this is the stats they showed us on day one for our program, which is that we were in the company of really gifted students that are highly driven and ambitious. And despite that, the graduating GPA is still a bit lower, mostly because of the obstacles and the competitive nature of the environment. And I think for me, what made it even harder with these list of symptoms that I had, I was weak on one side. I was always tired, always low energy. And I felt maybe with the brain injury, I may have had some cognitive issues. There's also not a great amount of literature on this recovery. And so to compete, I really thought I had to be 2 to 3 times healthier than the average individual. So the rest of the slides will be more about providing information and the thoughts I've had in kind of a sequential order, how I approached my fitness and nutrition to get better. And I think this has had a tremendous impact on my recovery and also ability to stand as a peer among you. So the reason I chose to share that story was I'd really just share why I chose to become so intensely involved in my own physical wellness. But I can also, and so moving forward, this will be a little bit more informational and kind of how I thought about my nutrition and the effects it had on me. And so the very first place to start, I think for most people, is this concept of eating clean. And this is what most doctors nowadays recommend, which is a lean diet where you replace all your carbohydrates with something complex and eliminating sugars while incorporating vegetables. And all of this has it's important because they share the quality of being low glycemic, meaning they spike your blood glucose less, and insulin in response, which has effects on your vascular health, which is pertinent to me, metabolic health, and also appetite regulation. And so this is just a curve to show what that means. So after a meal, for example, you have a higher blood glucose spike when you eat a high glycemic food instead of low glycemic. So fiber has a big thing to do with this, the structure of the carbohydrates as well. Then I became really intensely interested in something I kind of just coined brain food, which is food that may have an ability to enhance the neuroplasticity that was important to my recovery. It's not surprising that omegas were something I looked at a lot. So there's been a lot of recent studies looking at the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, with Western diets having a larger omega-6 predominance, and that being a reason why there's a greater cardiovascular risk in this population. If you look at another population of Inuits up north who consume no vegetables whatsoever, most of their diet comes from seal blubber, which is high in omega-3. And despite this, they have the lowest cardiovascular risk of all populations. Another important note is that you can get it from plant sources, but this comes in the form of ALA omega-3s, which have to be converted in the body to EPA or DHA. And the conversion rate is about 10 to 20%. And so it's much more efficient and effective to get your sources from fish or animal sources or from supplementation. And so I did a lot of this just because of its role in brain health. Next are blueberries. I think of all fruits, berries are the best fruits to eat. They're low glycemic despite having like a nice sweetness to them. They're high in antioxidants, and they contain something called anthocyanin, which is also present in other foods. This has been shown to induce neurogenesis, and a cup of blueberries is about the amount you need to induce neurogenesis. And if I were to eat one fruit for the rest of my life and not eat any other fruits, it'd be some sort of berry, just because of the nutritional profile. Obviously I started incorporating a lot more vegetables, not just the fiber for gut health and lowering the glycemic index of accompanying foods. It also keeps you fuller longer. And the nutritional profile is really, really good. I'm a big fan of cruciferous vegetables. They have a unique nutritional profile that you can't find in other vegetables. Broccoli, in particular, has a bunch of compounds known as sulforaphanes, and you can make it more bioavailable through mechanically chopping them to release the enzymes, and also letting them incubate for about an hour. The compounds have been shown to have anti-tumor effects in vivo and have high antioxidant properties. So I think if you were to eat one vegetable for the rest of your life, I would go with broccoli, which I know a lot of people hate. But it's one of the most complete vegetables and has things that are unique to this vegetable as well. Also, a fun fact for bodybuilding, this has gotten a lot of popularity there because of a naturally occurring aromatase inhibitor. For those who don't know, aromatases are highly expressed in adipose tissue, and they convert testosterone to estrogen. So if a lot of bodybuilders will tout that this is sort of an estrogen fighting vegetable. So next, the question I asked myself was, does it really matter, glycemic index? And you can see there are cases where people can get into a really fit shape without eating what we consider quality foods. And that's because they control calories. And so at the end of the day, calories do matter, but independent of calories, there's a lot of issues with spiking glucose and insulin. Glucose tends to be very inflammatory and contribute to vascular disease. Another bigger issue is if you try to control calories, you're not going to feel great just because of how fast that energy goes away. So you don't have that sustained energy you would get from complex carbohydrates in that post-spike period, which will stimulate a lot of appetite, so it'd be harder to control what you eat. And complex carbs, on the other hand, also provide the sustained energy, and especially for this is our resident marathon runner, for those who haven't met, and he's a big proponent of this as well. There's numerous, there's just countless studies looking at the benefits of exercise for brain function, not just cognitively, but also for me in particular, regaining a lot of my physical function back. This was a pretty arduous process. And I would say I felt extremely self-conscious at the gym, and I understand why the gym is intimidating for a lot of people. I was a big guy, and I wasn't able to lift very heavy. Also, my movements, including just walking, was really awkward. But I just kept reminding myself that it wasn't about anyone else, and all that mattered to me was what I needed to accomplish there. And as long as I did that, I felt like I could manage a lot of these negative feelings. Just for educational purposes, if you are trying to bulk, there is no such thing as hypertrophy range for sets. A lot of people tout 6 to 8 sets ranges for bulking or hypertrophy, and then 12 to 16 for toning. There's no such thing. It's all about what you eat and the effort you put in. You can hypertrophy with 2 to 3 sets. You can tone with 3 to 5 as well. It really doesn't matter. Also, I played with cardio a lot, and there's actually 3 forms of cardio that have benefits. And I think all 3 have a place in someone's exercise program. So there's low intensity steady state, moderate intensity steady state, and high intensity interval training. And just before I go into that, there's also something known as EPOC or afterburn. These are the calories you burn after a workout has ended. And this has gained a lot of popularity in mainstream just because it sounds kind of cool. For low intensity steady states, the benefit is that most of your burned calories will come from fat, but the absolute amount per unit time is very low. And so often bodybuilders will start their morning off with a fasted low intensity. Moderate intensity has the benefit of burning more calories per unit time, but you're digging into your muscles. And a lot of people will go into exercising wanting to preserve lean mass. So this can be ineffective for that. Neither of these cardio modes have any benefit derived from this afterburn. So afterburn, just a little add-on, it's caused by this sort of debt that you create in your muscles from hard exertion in a short amount of time. And this oxygen debt is sort of paid for 24 hours after the exercise is done. The only issue is that it's a lot less than you think. So it's been sold as this magic sort of cardio feature, but you only burn maybe 30, 45 calories extra, depending on how hard you exerted yourself during the high intensity interval training. So high intensity interval training is just going hard for 20 to 30 seconds and then resting for a short period of time and then going back into it. And I think all 3 cardios do have a place and have a time for it. I don't think you should stick to one, or one is necessarily better than the other. So at this point, recovery for me was very, very stepwise. So I initially regained a lot of function in my just proximal limbs, because those typically have the best function recovery. And the farther you out you get, especially in the hands, the slower and the harder it is to recover function. And I hit kind of a plateau when I regained some movement in the extensors of my hands. My recovery really slowed afterwards. I felt like things got stronger, but this weight still especially dumbbells, felt very different in my hands. And it wasn't until I tried intermittent fasting and timed my workouts towards the end of a fast that I was able to break through this plateau. I think part of it may be due to this increased sympathetic tone, which may have enhanced plasticity enhancing effects. And during this, I regained a lot of my grip function. And there's also a recent group in a low impact journal that showed that this sort of fasting protocol does seem to benefit in mice after strokes. And just to kind of sell this idea a little bit more, a lot of people think that intermittent fasting has benefits because of caloric restriction, so that when you diminish an eating window to 6 to 8 hours, for example, you consume by default fewer calories. But there's been a study where if you control for calories, the prolonged fasting itself does seem to have additional benefits. And these benefits are related to longevity and also cell function across different tissues. In autoimmune conditions, autoimmune patients, there seems to be an increased remission rate. So there may be a role of fasting for inflammatory processes. After the adaptation period, you also begin to see a suppression in appetite, which is important for me because I tend to overeat and I have a problem with regulating my appetite. I would support that there is some evidence for mental health, although there hasn't been any study looking at this quite yet. And lastly, if you look at the gut microbiome, important for gut health, when you fast, your beneficial microbes die at a slower rate. So there is a remodeling of your gut microbiome through this. I will say that I made a lot of mistakes. I would gradually diminish your eating window if you're new to this. 16-8 is a popular beginner protocol. People refer to this as lean gains. I would actually start probably 8 to 12. So your sleep does count towards your fasting window as well. And I would say that if you break your fast with a lower carb, higher fat item, you'll feel less tired afterwards, because there is a huge shift in not only blood supply, but also sympathetic tone in the nervous system. So you'll feel really tired afterwards if you don't correctly correct the composition of food during that meal. Also, I would supplement with potassium electrolytes, and this may be relevant for your medical education in this next slide. So in every cell in the body, there's an ATP NAK exchanger. This establishes a membrane potential, important for cell functions like action potential. And so this creates a gradient where you have more intracellular potassium and less extracellular potassium, and it is ATP driven. So in a low insulin state, such as fasting or other diets, you get this shift because this pump exchanger is no longer working as well. In addition, your kidneys are also insulin sensitive, and they're not doing a great job of reabsorbing sodium and water. And so all of this stimulates the production of release of aldosterone, which is or mineralocorticoid, which then further exacerbates this. So it tries to preserve sodium at the expense of potassium, but you're already doing a terrible job of preserving both. And so your total body electrolytes do go down. And this is actually related to refeeding syndrome. So if you think about what's going on, your intracellular compartment is being depleted of potassium. And when for anorexic patients that don't eat or are on low calorie diets for extended periods of time, when you reintroduce food, you're stimulating the production and release of insulin, as well as shifting this potassium into intracellularly, which has a lot of issues for other organs, so especially the heart. So when your extracellular potassium drops, you can have arrhythmias in the heart that can be life-threatening. So that you can definitely address these issues. When you're on a diet and this is more controlled, you'll feel symptoms of fatigue, cognitive fog of sorts, and you'll feel a lot better just by drinking some sort of 0-calorie or supplement with electrolytes. This is something I wish I knew earlier. So because I have a big appetite, I thought I wanted to try out the fad diets that were kind of going on to see if I could control how I was eating and also just positively impact my body composition. So the first one is the 0-carb diet that I think everyone's familiar with. People tout it for fat loss, but really you're just losing water. The moment you eat your carbs again, you regain a lot of that water because glycogen draws water into tissues, including your liver and muscles. The benefit is that you do avoid high glycemic foods and you avoid a lot of the processed stuff at the supermarket. For me, I really didn't need fat if I was going to restrict carbs. Otherwise, a lot of the food didn't feel very satiating. And again, I lost mostly water weight that came back with reintroduction of carbs. This is another diet that's been popular now, paleo and Whole30. Whole30 is sort of just a whole food diet. You're looking at grabbing unprocessed raw foods and cooking them or manipulating them. And paleo is more restrictive in that it also restricts dairy and grains. So I tried this for a while. The benefit, again, is you're consuming mostly low glycemic foods. But my biggest problem was that I was eating a little bit too lean. I didn't feel very good cognitively, and the foods were always unsatiating. And I relapsed quite a bit on these two diets. So this is probably my favorite diet just because it feels gluttonous, but it doesn't actually have that kind of effect on your body composition. This is the low carb, high fat diet. The stipulation is you get most of your calories, about 70 to 80% from fat sources. This is probably, I think, the diet I feel felt the best on. And I can notice huge changes in my performance, both academically and also athletically. You also have the benefit of avoiding these high glycemic foods, processed foods. And if I were to do it again, I would definitely supplement electrolytes. This diet also was important for me because it addressed a huge problem for me, which is my enormous appetite. Because you're teaching your body to use fats as a fuel source, it does a better job of utilizing stored fat as well. And so I'd rarely ever had an appetite. And this made the fasting easy as well. But at the end of the day, I think this is an important message, is that no diet is a magic bullet. When you restrict your eating, you automatically will probably decrease your calories. But if you do have some sort of fitness goal, your calorie content still matters. And that overall, the quantity of that is what affects health as well. So there's a huge controversy with eating high-fat diet, which is that people are really worried about its effects on cholesterol. And it does increase cholesterol, but it increases both LDL and HDL. So LDL is thought of the bad cholesterol, HDL is thought of the good cholesterol. But I think this it's an incomplete story. There's actually two types of LDLs that circulate. One is pattern B, which is a very small LDL particle size, and then pattern A, which is a larger, more buoyant particle size. There's differences in their oxidative capacity. So the current model is that LDL gets lodged in the vasculature, gets oxidized, uptaken by monocytes, causes atherosclerosis. These bigger particles are associated with with longevity. Also, it's hypothesized that they have a harder time getting lodged in the vasculature, and they have antioxidant properties that prevent them from being oxidized. Another component can consider is that your fat source does have different effects on your lipid profile. So for some reason that's not understood, plant-based fats, even if they're saturated, have different effects on your cholesterol and your lipid profile. And last is, of course, considering glucose. So my glucose actually runs low 60s to under 100, about 90s for most of the day. And this is important because glucose is pro-inflammatory in that it reacts with the vasculature walls and does promote vascular disease. And so these are things just to consider. And I don't think it's clear cut what the answer is. For me, it's always been about function. And so I felt the best on this diet. For you, it may not be the case. And especially if you have some sort of genetic dyslipidemia, this may not be a good diet for you to be on. And so I thought it'd be fun to share what I eat. I eat a lot of food, and it's nice to spend your caloric budget all in one meal because it feels like you're feasting. So right now I eat one meal a day, high fat, low carb. I make sure I get a lot of vegetables. I eat about 6 eggs because eggs for some reason make me feel the best. And I consume about 3,000 calories. The thing that's beneficial with keto is that it's very calorically dense since most of your calories are coming from fat. So it's a lot easier to get 3,000 calories worth of high fat products than low fat. And so I think through what I've done, I felt I started to feel a lot better about myself, about my situation. I think it boosted my self-esteem quite a bit. And I also feel like the way I see food has drastically changed. So I think all of us have some form of emotional relationship with food, and that when you're having a crappy day, having a nice junky meal makes you feel instantly better. And I stopped having these sorts of cravings and these sorts of thoughts. And now I see more as from a more functional standpoint, where food really makes me function differently from day to day. And the food I have the night before has an immense impact on how I'm doing the next day. And this has made me, I think, feel the best. Probably my entire life has been going on this protocol. And cognitively, I think I'm much better than before. I will say that I'm not an MD, just to cover my butt a little bit. The things I'm promoting aren't, they may not work for you. I think again, nutrition is highly individualized. But the symptoms that I had with the weakness and the low energy and cognitive issues, I was able to address to the best of my ability. I do have a lot of residual symptoms. So from motor standpoint, I have a lot of dystonia, and you can probably see from the way I walk, there's a little bit of a foot drop. But from a mood and energy standpoint, I've improved a lot better. I sleep a lot better. And cognitively, I feel like my memory is probably the best it's ever been. And with these changes, I didn't think I was actually going to finish the program at first, just because of how tough it felt. I was able to graduate with 3.94 GPA. And I was really grateful for the opportunity to come here where I can pursue a career and taking care of the patients I really care about. For just to kind of wrap up, I think kind of to summarize the thesis of what I'm trying to present, I think if you are interested in making a change, I think the most important first step is to find a reason. And then make sure that your change is proportional to the strength of that reason. For most people, you're going to have to make slow, gradual changes just because it's much more sustainable that way. And also you'll see progress a lot more than changing everything at once. I think the easiest first step is just changing the quality of food. Pursuing more complex carbs, pursuing more vegetables. And I think this will inherently lower your caloric intake and also just make you feel better overall. Also be honest with your relationship with food. I think a lot of times, again, our relationship with food is a little bit more emotional. It's meant to kind of address a stress coping mechanism. And I think replacing that with something else like meditation, mindfulness, headspace, I think will benefit you in the long run instead of using food as sort of this clutch. Also, you want to focus on sustaining your habits, not your appearances or your destination. I think obsessing over the goals and where you want to be isn't productive. And I think it creates a lot more stress instead of being something useful. And just be positive. So along the way, when you do fulfill your habits or do something, rewarding yourself and letting yourself feel accomplished is really important because that kind of positivity is what allows you to drive that momentum forward. Another important strategy is at the grocery store. So really the best strategy is to shop in the outskirts. I'm a little bit debatable about the wine and spirits, but the outskirts of the store are probably the best places for food options. Most of the stuff in the aisles are junk. There's some rare items where this would be useful. By doing this, you'll just automatically limit the kind of foods you'll have at your house, and then also limit that consumption. So it's just some common pitfalls. If you are relapsing a lot, it's probably because you're not eating enough calories, and this is where counting calories can be useful. If you're pursuing the keto diet and you're relapsing into carbs or other cravings, it's because you're not eating enough fat. When you have a large percent of your calories coming from fat, it suppresses appetite and it suppresses these cravings. Another big issue is people tend to do too much at once. You try to change way too many things, and there's too many things going on for you to do that. And so your probability of relapsing is a lot lower if you make gradual changes. Next, again, electrolytes made this a lot easier for me. And a lot of the symptoms I was experiencing during these adaptation periods were mostly due to electrolytes. A vegetable intake is really important. Keto isn't an excuse to avoid vegetables. I think a lot of people mistake that. Also, if you want to succeed, you have to plan for it. Being intentional with your nutrition is probably the best thing to do. So if you plan on eating healthy for a week, you need to plan the meals for that week and shop accordingly. And lastly, I'm a big proponent of psychological release. I think being strict is good, but to be flexible allows for better sustainability. And so this is a recent cheat day that it was glorious. I had about a dozen donuts and a large pizza. And the way I do that is I keep a cheat diary. So when I do have cravings, I'll write that and take a mental note. And then for the next cheat day, I won't restrict myself. I wanted to go over some myths and misconceptions, and I think this applies to both men and women. Just because you lift weights doesn't mean you're gonna bulk. These gains it's based on your eating habits and hormonal composition. Guys find it hard to put on weight too. So I think this fear of lifting weights is a little bit misinformed. Not all foods are the same. So depending on how the animals are raised, the nutritional profile, especially in the fatty acid profile, like your omega-3 to 6 ratios, are completely different. An animal that's allowed to freely roam and be active has much greater ratios of omega-3 than one that isn't. And I think part of that has also affected a lot of this Western diet and the health consequences of such. There is a concept of eating these super athletes. So game meats tend to be a little bit healthier in terms of the fatty acid profile. And if you think about wild salmon, they literally swim upstream to reproduce and die. So these foods tend to be much higher in nutritional quality. Also, it's important that progress is slow. There's a lot of misleading info on the internet where you see these 30-day transformations. Most of these individuals, one, are either on some sort of anabolics, or two, they have been on a lot of bulk cut cycles before, so their body's used to adjusting very quickly. And so being just patient with that is really important. Also, they can oftentimes be fake. So this was actually done in 5 minutes. If you take a after photo first and then eat a bunch of Diet Coke and sodium-laden chips, you can get the before photo that you see here. So again, not to say that everything is fake, but just don't be misled by the timelines that you see on the internet. Progress is extremely slow. And I just wanted to end with thanking you all for listening, Noreen and Andrew for organizing and giving me a chance to talk. I was able to provide some information that was useful or interesting at the very least. I also wanted to provide you some just final thoughts. Eating something we do every day, but I don't think we put a proportional amount of effort into it, despite it having a really large effect on our lives. And I really wanted to share my story, just encourage all of you to do your own research and share the tremendous impact it's had on me. Especially knowing that it's helped me so much. And this kind of transformation took every second of the 9 years that it did. And I wasn't perfect. I made a lot of mistakes on the way, a lot of adjustments. It's been challenging, but it's been a growing experience as well. And I've been able to learn so much about taking better care of your bodies and taking responsibility for it. I don't want any of you to think also that sharing my obstacles should in any way, shape, or form diminish your own challenges. I think we're all unique in the sense that we have unique challenges, and so our approaches are going to be really unique to us. So we are trying to organize a longitudinal group in the future to just talk about these issues, to have strategies to cope with it, especially in a high stress environment like the MSTP. Um, so we're going to try to work out together and also try to provide a little bit of accountability for each other. I do want to welcome everyone across all levels and backgrounds. I know the gym can be intimidating, so just please come and join us and have fun and challenge yourselves a little bit. This is my contact in the meantime. I love talking about this stuff, discussing it, learning more. So if you're interested before the program starts, just feel free to reach out. I can always use more workout buddies, and I love taking people that are new to the gym and just showing them the form and techniques of everything. And so I hope you all enjoyed and got something out of it. Wanted to thank again for you all for listening, and then Eric, Cassandra, Brenna, Joey, and Bridget for listening and giving feedback before all of this. And look forward to working with all of you on fitness-related things.
Thank you so much, David. So we have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So the first question was, how was the transition from BME as an undergrad to a more nutrition-focused in grad school and I guess med school as well? And did you feel like the rigor of BME made you prepared to take it on?
So BME, in my opinion, is very different than med school. The mode of learning and the mode of thinking is completely different. I would say the rigor, I mean, the BME program, I found that it stimulated or motivated me to, because of how challenging it was, it motivated me to be disciplined. In terms of the nutrition, how I approach it, I think it does affect how I see my body. I kind of view myself in more of an engineering light, which is that I'm something to optimize. And how I feel, how I function are things that are dependent on what I eat and what I do in the day. So I've become more organized in my approach to myself. And I think a lot of that has to do with my education as a BME. Can you repeat that question? Did I miss anything by any chance?
No, I think that covered it. So another question was, how would someone accomplish a high-fat, low-carb diet while staying vegetarian?
Oh yeah, so that's actually my next step. So I don't plan on eating animal products for the rest of my life. I think there is some concern over the effects of animal products on overall health and gut health. I do want to eventually transition to a vegetarian diet. I had done that in March for a month, and I felt great on it. I think the effects of vegetables or animal products on vascular response to exertion is well documented, meaning that you do increase athletic performance by increasing cardiac output and blood supply through a vegetarian diet. The hardest part of that is the plant-based fats. I struggled with it in that it's hard to really calculate the amount of calories that you'll need, just because seeds are a good source of fat, and so are a bunch of nuts. But there's inherent enzymes that they possess, like phytic acids and other things that inhibit digestion. If you think about what a seed is used for, it's to pass through your digestive system and reproduce for the plants. And so you have to really strategize getting that from, you have to, so soaking the seeds is one way of doing it and washing them. It is a tough challenge, and it's something I'm still working on, but it is possible. So avocados became a huge staple, guacamole, nuts and seeds. I still consume a large vegetable content. The biggest issue for me also was I could no longer do one meal a day because vegetables tend to be really calorically, they're not very calorically dense. And so they take up a lot of volume. So I had to expand my eating window a little bit. So I had 2 meals a day instead.
And then another question was, what are some of the plant-based foods that provide omega-3s?
So technically speaking, anything that has fat has omega-3 to 6 profile. Omega-3 really is just in flax seeds. That's the extent of my knowledge. So I did consume a lot of flax seeds when I was a vegetarian for a little bit. There's actually a term for that, which is ketotarian. I don't, wait, can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Just what plant-based foods have omega-3s?
Yeah, I think predominantly it's flax seeds, chia seeds, I think as well. Basically seeds are going to be your friends here. There is a lot of omega-6s in olive oil, and this has kind of gotten a lot of controversy, but olive oil also contains oleic acid, which seems to be responsible for its anti-inflammatory properties. Yeah, I think it's very limited in the selection. but I think flax and chia will be your friends here.
And then do you have any advice about counseling patients on healthy dietary changes?
This is one of the toughest, I think, topics because it depends on the patient population. The ones that I'm more used to, I talked with a lot of stroke patients during undergrad. It depends on who they are and if you can identify anything mental health related going on. Those are obviously one of the main barriers. For me, it's a little different. I kind of use my story as a platform to kind of build rapport and talk with them, and then try to provide my story as a way to kind of push them in the right direction. Basically, you want to identify. I don't think anybody intentionally wants to eat unhealthy. That would be my baseline assumption. And I think what gets in the way is stress and obstacles in life. So if you can identify something that they've done and why it didn't work, I think you can build a better strategy for approaching future problems and obstacles. And just encouragement and positive. I think staying positive with them. There's a lot of shame and embarrassment when it comes to food and the food we eat. And I think really mitigating that is important. But there's no like real universal way of approaching a patient. I think every patient is different. Providing education is probably the best you can do, and maybe some motivation, and making small gradual changes, I think, is probably the best approach. And it's a tough patient population because when you are overweight and obese, your whole metabolic system is geared towards you either gaining more and maintaining that weight. Losing weight is extremely uncomfortable at times, which is why I think some of these strategies have a place in any patient's diet protocol.
And then just a couple of personal questions. What oil do you cook with, and what time of day do you usually eat your meal?
So I usually eat, so after I eat 3,000 calories, I usually don't want to do anything else except sleep and kind of just rest and digest. I predominantly cook with avocado and olive oil. Olive oil, so there is a stipulation. I do use cast iron pans for some of the meats that I cook. Olive oil has a very low smoking point, and once it starts to smoke, it starts to degrade, and it becomes kind of rancid, and then the benefits of it kind of just degrades. Avocado oil tends to have a higher smoking point, so you can cook at a higher heat with that. Other than that, I think I mean just I budget my groceries too, so staying within that budget is important. So avocado and olive oil tend to be okay for that budget.
And then the last question that we have is how to make a high-fat diet vegan. So a lot of keto folks rely on dairy for their fats.
Yeah, that's a great point. Vegan is probably a vegan keto diet is probably the hardest diet to maintain just because of how restrictive it is. I'm not fully when I was vegetarian, I actually was a ovo vegetarian, so I consumed eggs to prevent any nutritional deficiencies. I think for this problem, coconut oil I think works really well. I think I forgot to mention that. Avocados, guacamole, and any kind of seed. I think that's going to be your best friend, and you do have to be considerate of the fact that your seeds are probably not. I weigh out my food, and I don't think I was absorbing all of the calories that I was weighing out, just because it inhibits digestion.
And then someone just asked, aren't there issues with coconut oil because of the large amounts of saturated fats?
I think, so this is a great point, and I'm glad that was brought up. I don't have any gripe with saturated fats. I think majority of my calories come from saturated fats. For whatever reason, saturated fats just make me feel the best. My cholesterol is fine. I've checked it. My triglycerides are non-existent. This whole like controversy over saturated fats, I think, is a little overhyped, because most of the studies that you see are done in the context of a high carb diet. If you look at any association studies, or if you look at even the high fat diets in mice, they have carbs in them. When you restrict carbs, I think the problem is a little bit different. Also, plant-based fats tend to have a different effect on your lipid profile, even in the context of a Western diet.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for all your thoughts and all of your questions. I'd like to remind all the VSSA students to stay on for extra questions, and please feel free to contact David about any other